Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom introduce players to an enormous detailed world, full of hidden shrines, ancient ruins, and towering mountains. But no matter how vast the landscape feels, there's always that lingering question: what's out there beyond the borders? These games have perfected the art of making you feel like you're on the edge of discovery at every turn. You can climb every mountain, dive off every cliff, and explore vast oceans. Yet, the game ultimately stops you from venturing too far. So, what's the deal with those towering mountains and endless oceans that block your path? Could there be something more beyond Hyrule? In this video, we'll break down the theories about what could lie beyond Hyrule's borders. We'll start with a look at the physical boundaries, dive into the lore hints dropped by the game, and explore some of the most popular fan theories floating around. Whether you believe Hyrule is part of a larger continent, or that there are entire hidden civilizations out there, these boundaries serve more purpose than just stopping you from wandering too far. When you first start exploring Hyrule in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, it feels like there's no limit to where you can go. You can climb any cliff, swim across any lake, and glide through the skies, until you hit one of the game's natural boundaries. The Hebra Mountains, for instance, stretch across the northern part of the map like a fortress of snow and ice. Sure, you can scale some of its peaks, but it soon becomes clear that these mountains aren't meant to be crossed, and if you keep going west, the Gerudo Highlands turn into an even more desolate landscape. Jagged cliffs and hostile weather conditions tell you one thing: you're not supposed to be here. But these natural barriers feel different from typical video game boundaries. They aren't just there to box you in, they make you wonder what's beyond them. After all, these mountains don't just end, they stretch into the distance, hinting that something lies beyond. Could these towering ranges be hiding a lost land? Is there another kingdom just over that last snowy peak? The idea that there's something out there taps into a fundamental part of why Breath of the Wild's world feels so alive. It doesn't give you all the answers, and that keeps you guessing. Then there's the southern and eastern borders, where the seas take over. You've probably flown across these waters on your paraglider, or sailed a raft, but no matter how far you try to go, the ocean just keeps stretching on and on. These endless waters create the same sense of mystery as the mountains. Unlike other Zelda games, where the ocean is central to the story, here it acts as a boundary that dares you to think, what's out there across the waves? For a game that gives you such freedom, these boundaries feel intentional. They aren't just about stopping you from leaving the game world, they're about keeping you intrigued. They make Hyrule feel like just one small part of a much larger unexplored world. So, if you're left wondering what's on the other side of these natural barriers, it's likely because the developers wanted you to feel that way. While the game doesn't outright show you what's beyond Hyrule's borders, there are plenty of hints that suggest the world stretches far beyond what you see on the map. Let's start with the Zonai. Tears of the Kingdom introduces the ancient Zonai civilization, a culture shrouded in mystery and scattered across Hyrule in the form of ruins and forgotten technology. These ruins, especially in the Faron region, suggest that the Zonai once had a powerful presence in Hyrule. But where did they come from? And why did they disappear? Some fans speculate that the Zonai might have originated from a land beyond Hyrule's borders. Their advanced technology and distinct architecture make them feel separate from Hylian culture, and there's little explanation as to where they went. Could their homeland lie across the seas or beyond the mountains? And if so, why haven't we seen any sign of their civilization beyond the ruins left behind? This is a tantalizing mystery, especially when you consider the potential for future Zelda games to explore these questions. There's also the matter of regions and kingdoms mentioned in past Zelda games that we never see in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. In Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, players visit the lands of Labrynna and Holodrum, two distinct regions separate from Hyrule. While they don't appear in Breath of the Wild, there's no reason to believe they don't exist. These kingdoms could lie beyond the borders of Breath of the Wild's map, unseen but very much part of the same world. The Zelda series has a history of connecting its different lands, even when they aren't part of the same game. Another clue comes from the Wind Waker, where the world of Hyrule was submerged beneath the ocean. While Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom take place in a different timeline, the idea of vast seas covering the land isn't far-fetched. Could the oceans that border Breath of the Wild's map be hiding remnants of that world? Maybe these seas stretch far beyond what we can see, connecting to the Great Sea of the Wind Waker or to other unexplored islands. The lore doesn't provide all the answers, but that's what makes it fun. The idea that there's more to this world than what we see keeps fans speculating and theorizing, which only adds to the richness of the Zelda universe. Of course, with a game world as rich and mysterious as Hyrule, fan theories are bound to emerge. One of the most popular theories is that the world of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is part of a much larger continent, with lands from other Zelda games lying just beyond the map. For example, some fans think the Termina, the alternate reality from Majora's Mask, could exist just beyond the mountains. The idea here is that Hyrule isn't the only world. There are parallel worlds and regions just out of reach. This theory makes sense when you consider how the Zelda series has dealt with parallel worlds in the past. Games like A Link to the Past and Twilight Princess introduced alternate versions of Hyrule, and Majora's Mask famously took place in Termina, a world completely separate from Hyrule. If these parallel worlds exist, it's not a stretch to imagine that Breath of the Wild's Hyrule could be one of many interconnected regions. Finally, some fans speculate that entirely new regions or civilizations could exist beyond Hyrule. Given the introduction of the Zonai in Tears of the Kingdom, it's possible that their homeland lies somewhere outside the map, waiting to be discovered in future games. After all, the Zelda series is known for introducing new lands with each installment, and the developers have hinted that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are just the beginning of a new era for the series. While much of the speculation about what lies beyond Hyrule is fueled by fan theories and lore clues, there's also the question of developer intent. In interviews, the creators of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have talked about how they wanted to create a world that feels alive and full of mystery. By leaving certain areas unexplored and hinting at a larger world beyond the borders, they keep players curious and engaged. One of the key design principles in open world games is to create a sense of endless possibility. Even though the world has physical boundaries, those boundaries shouldn't feel like the edge of the game. They should feel like the edge of something much bigger. By placing impassable mountains and oceans around Hyrule, the developers give the impression that there's a whole world out there, just waiting to be discovered. It's also possible that these boundaries are setting the stage for future Zelda games. The Zelda series has a history of expanding its world with each new game, and the developers may have intentionally left certain areas unexplored so they can revisit them in future installments. Whether it's the Zonai homeland, a return to Termina, or an entirely new region, the idea that Hyrule is part of a much larger world leaves plenty of room for future exploration. In the end, what lies beyond Hyrule's mountains and oceans remains one of the biggest mysteries in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The game's natural boundaries aren't just there to limit exploration, they're there to spark curiosity and fuel speculation. Whether you believe in hidden civilizations, parallel worlds, or just untapped potential for future Zelda games, the idea that Hyrule is part of a much larger world keeps players wondering and theorizing long after they've put down the game. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I hope you enjoyed this video on the Legend of Zelda's lore. Shout out to my subs, and if you'd like to help the channel grow, you can click the join button or sign up to my Patreon.